Hey guys, Wontonton here with a deck profile. I had a request to make a film law deck profile, which I used to top locals a few weeks back, and so here it is. I'm going to be using the OP sim just because I think it is cleaner and easier for you guys to see. So this deck has the same game plan as regular law, where you're trying to flood the board as quick as possible so you can start using your leader ability as quick as possible, and start generating value with your searchers and on-play effects. The film cards are great at this since they summon each other, and so you can build a board out of nowhere. And at the same time, your board has a lot more power compared to a regular law while using the same amount of Dawn. Disclaimer though, I do think that a regular law is better overall just because it's more consistent and doesn't run out of steam as often, since this deck does cheat out multiple characters at a time, and so sometimes runs into the problem where you have less cards in your hand than a law would normally like. But I do think that this is a funner deck since sometimes you can just get the perfect draw and high roll your way to victory. So without further ado, here's my film law deck list. Keep in mind one of the beauties of law is that it's such a flexible deck. And so one law deck can be wildly different from another, even if they're both the same archetype. So this is just my version. Feel free to tinker with it as you see fit. So let's get the obvious stuff out of the way first. The cards that most laws should be running. First, you have the Heart and Soul of Laudex, which is your 5 cost blocker law. This card, in combination with your leader ability, is the engine of every law deck, and it really lets you tap into the deck's true potential. He is irreplaceable, and you should not be running less than 4 copies if you can help it. Next are the other irreplaceables for law decks. Your searchers, and that's 4 Namis and Bonnie. My version doesn't run the Dan like most laws do, since I don't think I have enough red 1 drops to justify running her. Searchers are perfect since they are cheap bodies to fill your board with and let you generate so much value when you start using them with your leader ability and blocker law to just keep refilling your hand and not fall behind in card advantage since you're always looking to flood the board. Of the two, Nami is definitely the most important one in this deck since this deck runs so many more Straw Hats and Supernovas, but Bonnie is still a great card since you'll sometimes need to search for a law or maybe a Zoro, for example. But I really only use her when I'm trying to fish for a specific supernova. Brook is another very important card for this deck since he's basically a free body, and I love using him to fill the board in the early game while applying pressure early with the 2 attached Dawn. And on top of that, he's also a 2K counter. Just a great card for this deck, and a great card overall, really. Next, we have Rush Zoro. He's another card that can generate a lot of value and aggression just because you can constantly bounce him in and out of your hand. Next is Next is a 1 cost blocker chopper. Not much to say here. He's a cheap blocker. Does great for filling out the board and protecting your board. I don't actually run any 1 cost blocker beiges since I couldn't find room for him, and I was happy with a more offensive deck. Otama lets you get into a lot of shenanigans with Vista and Jet Pistol. She costs 1 and she's a 2K counter, so just a very good card in general. Next, I run 2 copies of Vista. Vista's ability is just so strong with leader and character law that I can't leave him out. Sometimes he can just carry you in the early to mid game by himself with his on play ability. And after testing out this deck, I found that 2 to 3 is probably the best number of vistas for this deck, but it does depend on what your local meta looks like. If it's a little bit more aggressive, maybe more Zoros, probably consider running more vistas. Okay, now for the film cards. So for this version, Rook and Brook and Robin are going to be the main pieces that enable your film combo. Ideally, you're going to want to summon Brook into Robin, into maybe a Chopper or a Brook or Nami, just depending on what you need at the time. But don't be afraid to use them separately as well. Brook into a 3 cost Nami or a Zoro is still a strong play. Same with Robin into a 1 cost Nami or a 2 cost Brook. The best part about Brook and Robin is that they each generate enough threat individually that your opponent has to respect the power on the board, and that's a real strength of this deck. Generating a meaty board where most of your characters can threaten their leader on their own. Next is 2 cost Chopper, only 2 copies here. He's mostly here just for the 2K counter, but you can also use him as another body to cheat out with Brook or Robin. Then just bounce it back into your hand for another red card. His ability has come in handy on a couple of occasions, but again, he's mostly here for the counter. I really like 3 cost Nami because she gives you the option of a 5K body that can pressure your opponent while at the same time generate additional value with her ability. She is a bit slow and sometimes a bit slower than you would like. So a lot of lists I've seen don't run her, but sometimes you can get a lot of value from her swings to really take command of the game. Don't forget that the Namis can't search each other. So you cannot search for 1 cost Nami with film Nami and vice versa. And to be honest, after Brook and Robin, I don't think any other film card is really a must have. So feel free to just mix and match them as you like, depending on what your goal for the deck is and your playstyle. But these 4 cards are the core of my film law deck. Now for the personal preferences. Uh, Law is a very versatile leader with access to 2 very strong and versatile colors in red and green, and that's the reason everyone runs their own versions with their own personal choices, depending on what they're looking for. So again, I urge you to experiment until you find a version you like. So first, we have a single 7 cost Luffy. I added him because at the time my locals had a lot of Kinemons and Zoros, so I found that he was a very useful card in those matchups. He helped you block out Zoros and keep up with Kinemon in the mid to late games. It also just feels so good to chain Luffy with 3 other characters. I only run one because he can sometimes just clog your hand otherwise. But if you're opting for a slower film deck, I think he is a solid addition you should consider. Next is a 5 cost Rush Luffy. I like going aggressive with this deck, and I find that the extra reach he gives you is just what this deck needs to close a game sometimes. Again, just 1 copy because he does sometimes clog your hand. So we have 2 copies of Jet Pistol here. Jet Pistol is a very common card in Law decks, and I like using it to get rid of big blockers like Queen or Law, or to get rid of bigger characters to buy yourself another turn and or to protect your board. I find that Drake is one of those true 50-50 cards in Law decks where half the lists I've seen have him and half don't. I really like him because in red, green, and blue matchups, he can give you so much value and tempo with his abilities sometimes, especially in the early to mid game. Finally, I have Gordon because he's a 2K counter and you can cycle him for another card if you need to. Plus, he can be searched by 3 cost Film Nami. Oh, forgot a Vista there. And so here is my film law deck. Hope you guys enjoyed this fairly quick deck profile. If you guys have any questions about the deck, please just leave a comment down below. I'll try to answer them as quick as I can. And until next time, I'll talk to you guys later.